Good morning. I'm doing a drive here in my Tesla with FSD engaged. Continue to see the progress since I've had the update. Things continue to be incrementally improving at this point. Had a little bit of a choppy ride this morning though on the way in, but doing another drive on the way out and have it on record uh, so you can experience it alongside with me while we chat. I was watching yesterday. Elon Musk over at the Twitter headquarters had a impromptu meeting and ultimately interview with a reporter from the BBC, British Broadcast. Um, kind of came around. I guess there's been a lot of back and forth with the news organizations. I guess the the traditional media platforms, New York Times, PBS, NPR, and BBC. So I guess there's been some activity with Twitter going through and trying to better categorize and label groups, whether with the blue check mark or the badges associated with companies and with news organizations, identifying them as whether it's state sponsored or publicly not sponsored but publicly funded, to give just a little bit more understanding of media's potential biases or influences. And initially, I think they identified BBC as being state funded or state government funded. And there's been a lot of, I guess, from their point of view, the organization, BBC, and others, um, that's an unfair characterization. For BBC, there's a tax that the citizens of England pay towards the public funding of these media outlets, BBC being one of them. So, they've kind of pushed against any sort of state affiliation and identify it more clearly to be publicly affiliated or publicly supported through a federal tax or a state tax. Um, and then the other part is like New York Times, for an example, they've had some um, pushback from the requirement to pay the $7 a month if you go through the website for the subscription to Twitter in order to maintain your blue checkmark verification. Um, Elon's up to this point has been communicating and trying to explain that this financial barrier or hurdle allows it to better identify individuals, so that it can improve on removing the plethora or like the overwhelming number of bots that were initially on the platform and have been since uh, improving on, by removing those bots in order to give a better sense of true of the truth. His goal is, as he states, is to be the least to be the best source of truth, or at least the least source of misunderstanding or mistruth, or um, and so one of these efforts to do that is to require individuals to pay and to prioritize those who pay the $7 a month subscription to be identified with the blue check mark in order to have those enhanced or elevated, and then to suppress those that are not, because the ones with a blue check mark and from his point of view and how he sees it is, they've been validated and to be more valuable towards the goal of obtaining the best truth out of the Twitter users. So New York Times, and it sounds like other news affiliation, at least the mass media, um, they've all kind of gathered around not wanting to pay for the subscription, as well as being perturbed or irritated by the labeling of their funding sources. So they've recently, I think, NPR and PBS have decided to cancel their accounts, basically remove their accounts in association with Twitter. Ultimately, whether that's, I guess, is more of a symbolic gesture, because most of these mass media, um, these mass media platforms or organizations, they don't really have a major following on Twitter or have a major influence on Twitter. So the impact on the Twitter users should be pretty minimal, if not pretty, negligible at best. So anyway, so this all leads into yesterday, BBC, I guess their American correspondent, who's been kind of covering Twitter over the past few weeks and months since Elon took ownership of Twitter. He's been on the ground in San Francisco, at the headquarters, outside the headquarters, reporting on Twitter. That's basically his one and sole assignment, or a main assignment, at least from what it sounds like. And he's been interviewing a lot of the employees that have been let go in the past few months. Apparently there was just under 8,000 employees when Elon took over, and now they're down to just approximately 1,500 employees, which is a mass exodus or mass termination of a number of employees from the organization. And so so he's out there covering the story, and he has to come in. Elon was there at the time, gave him access, and then also asked for an interview, and Elon agreed. And for the interview, though, Elon also included the interview on Twitter Spaces. So this is basically your Audible. This is basically allowing the interview to be broadcasted through audio to all and any Twitter users that want to join the space. I think at one point towards the end, there was up to 3 million individuals or Twitter users listening to this interview, which is, I mean, that's a large number for any sort of media situation. Okay, I had to disengage there. I don't know why it was trying to force itself into that lane between two cars. Maybe it just wanted to show that it could. Okay, let's get back to engaging here. Yeah, it still wants to get to that left lane. I guess it sees that to be the lane it needs to be in sort of to navigate it. Don't really understand it. We're not too far away from the right-hand turn we need to take, so figure it would want to stay there, but maybe it saw the left hand being moving quicker, which it is, and wanted to get into the faster lane. And here you've got the indication actually showing that it's coming up for another lane change, which makes sense. It needs to get back over to the right lane. So yeah, that was in this engagement, just kind of a break. So yeah, the interview was pretty interesting. There was one particular part where the reporter was reported much of it. If you were listening to the spaces or listen to the interview, the reporter used a lot of this generalization, like people are saying, I've been hearing from many people, I've seen, and so the reporter indicates that he's seen from his experience that there's been an increase in hate or hate or negative speech on the platform. And so Elon kind of pressed him on that. It's like, what do you mean by that? What is your experience? And the reporter was just basically caught in a situation where he kind of backtracked what he was saying, not exactly what he initially said, and then was unable to really substantiate any of the claims that he was proposing. Wait a minute, are they closed today? God dang it, they are. Yes, I've got control, Tesla. Looks like there's somebody here. It's like empty. So I need to check. Anyway, just to complete the story, it was an interesting space. I definitely recommend, if you're on Twitter, to go check it out. They have a recording of it that you can listen to. But it was just a really good highlight of how media identifies a narrative, and they're going to push that narrative, and it doesn't matter if that narrative is right or wrong, as well as it's not even researched or vetted to know if there's any evidence of the narrative, but they'll press on. And even the hardest part for me is like when this individual, as a person that hopefully like knows right and wrong, wants to be and a journalist that is supposed to identify the truth or seek the truth. That's the kind of the intent for journalism, is to put light on things where there is no light. When kind of identified the situation where the person hadn't done any research, doesn't have any substantiation to the claim, and wasn't able to identify any examples when pressed for it, just kept squirming around, going round and round, uh, avoiding any way of, you know, um, capitulating to being wrong. Like, if wrong is you can never be wrong, which is just a horrible mindset. I mean, being wrong is okay. Mistakes happen, but to just not admit to those mistakes and to be begrudging to give any sort of leeway or possibility that maybe there's more to it, or there's something to um, to improve on or fix. It's just awful. It's a difficult situation. There's no way to come to any sort of progress or improvement if you're not willing to accept mistakes or that you are wrong in a position, as little as that is. I mean, okay, you say that there was more hate speech on the platform, and that's from your own experience, and then you can't identify it. Say, okay, maybe I need to revisit it, or hey, you're right, I can't think of an example. I'll have to get back to you. Nothing. No backtrack, just completely going in circles about that's not what he said, that's not what he meant, it's just been too long, he doesn't look at that feed, blah, 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 excuse, excuse, excuse. I mean, how awful. And what does that do to your reputation? And this just carried on to a lot of questions. It was just a lot of this. I hear this. I heard, this is what everyone's saying. What do you say to this? How do you feel about this? Always trying to find some sort of crack in, not really seeking a truth. It didn't give the impression that he was after something useful. It was just after something that he was directed to or pursuing, and would go at any means necessary to try to get to that means, even if it means skirting the truth or um, making things up ultimately. Anyways, state of the world. Hopefully, we see this and are able to see some improvement or changes, wake up and move forward to a different way of things. Thanks for hanging out. Appreciate you listening to me. We'll chat later.